It's a company in northern Bavaria with 700 employees. They were taken over in the year 2006 by Beijing number one machinery company. The name already is clear, it's a state-owned company, 2006. That means they, within this German company, they have experience with their Chinese investors for 8 years right now. For 8 years, a lot of experience about it. They are doing big machinery for drilling and so on. This machinery can drill parts which have a diameter of about 6 meters. A huge machine. It's a really huge machinery. Very special. Another company, also in that area, northern Bavaria, Pre. It's not a brand name here on the main street or high street. Pre, they have about 2,500 people workforce, half of them white collar, engineers, developers, half of them blue collar. They are developing automotive electronics. These advanced automotive electronics you have in the new BMWs and Audi, they are developing the thing. And they were taken over a few years ago, I don't know the exact date, by a private-owned Chinese company from the province of Zhejiang. Zhejiang is a province south of Shanghai where nearly all the companies are private companies. There's no state-owned company at all. Alibaba also comes from Zhejiang, for example. Another company, EMAG. The name EMAG, they have got 3 plants in Germany. They are building also special machinery. I don't know exactly right now which one, I haven't been there. And about 1,000 employees. And they are now 51% Chinese, by a Chinese private company, private-owned company. Next company, Zaura. Zaura, they are doing, it was a Swiss company, textiles machinery. And this company has been taken over also by a private Chinese investor. They have a lot of branches all over Germany, but you know, the market for textiles machinery is about 80 to 90% is in Asia, so obviously there's a big interest on the Asian market for companies like this. And then the next company is Ziegler. Ziegler, it's not also not a brand name, but in every big community, the man in charge of the fire brigade knows the name. They're doing the cars, the big equipment for the fire brigades. Very specialized company. It was for 3 years in Chapter 11 in Germany, bankruptcy, insolvency, and has been bought out of insolvency from a Chinese state-owned company. The state-owned company is a China maritime construction company. MCC is sitting in Shenzhen, I think. And this company, they are doing also the, these gangways for the airports. And because they do the gangways for the airport, they thought it fits in their product portfolio to offer also the fire brigades, the cars, the trucks for the fire brigades for the airport. So it fits into this picture. State-owned company. There were some other companies I think I remember later. But you see already from this picture, there's a lot of investment in different parts, but basically machinery, high specialized machinery, with only 1 or 2 competitors worldwide. Car parts and electronics, automotive electronics. These are the picture of investment in the so-called small and medium enterprise in Germany, or Mittelstand companies in Germany. And as I already said before our coffee break, I think the discussion about state-owned companies has to be, it's a very long discussion. a lot of these companies who have acquired these German Mittelstand firms, Chinese companies who have acquired which have invested in these German Mittelstand firms, they are private. But the term private is always not always in the sense we think is what private company is here in Belgium or in Germany. A lot of the owners of the company have, of course, very good relations with the communist party at the provincial level, at the local level, and so on. In the literature, I got a new paper from an economist. He called these companies with this good direct relation red hat companies, private companies with red hats, because they are very much affiliated also to the system. So we have to get used to it, that we have a lot of different sorts of ownership on the Chinese level, and our differentiation, state-owned or private, doesn't fit the whole picture. That's a problem about it. What have we done at these two workshops, the workshops of this year and last year? We have established some sort of network for works councils, unions and union officials who have to cope with these Chinese investors. That was the basic idea of it. I think we did it right now. We have a lot of contacts right now to other also Chinese invested small and medium enterprises in Germany, which are mentioned. Sargummi. Sargummi, it's a company in the Saar area near Saarbrücken. About 1,000 employees. Has been also in insolvency in Chapter 11. And then the Works Council boss went to the Chinese Chamber of Commerce in Germany, in Berlin, and asked for contacts to Chinese investors. That means the story had been developed that way around from the Works Council boss himself, who wanted a chance to come out of for the workforce to get a chance with a new investor to get out of Chapter 11. We have a lot of further contacts I mentioned here. What are the experiences from these SME companies in Germany with the Chinese investors? When I chaired the workshop, when I started with the workshop in 2013, I thought there might be much aversion and much preoccupation of the Chinese investors. It was a totally different picture. All the people from the different works councils who attended, from the different companies who attended, said the Chinese investment is long-term, is strategic. Long-term, I will explain, go into detail. Strategic, that means the Chinese investor doesn't want to make a quick buck, turn around it like KKR or Goldman Sachs and so on. These hedge funds are doing, but they're doing it for long-term investment because it fits into their portfolio, because they think for the Chinese machinery industry, they need to have also foothold in the German machinery industry. All these ideas are behind it. And it's an idea about investment in the brand made in Germany. What it means, I learned later. For example, these companies Ziegler, which is producing trucks for fire brigades, special equipment for fire brigades. They said in their talks as works council with the Chinese side, the Chinese insisted that the trucks are being built in Germany. They said the problem is no one would trust a Chinese fire brigade truck made in China. That's a problem. We need this product made in Germany, then we can sell it worldwide. That was the idea behind it. And there's a lot of those ideas about it. That means the Chinese investment is focused on technology, on brands, not on high street brands, but on brands in machinery and equipment and so on, and is focused on management skills. I learned that the Chinese side doesn't interfere in the management of these companies. Once, 2 times a year, they have discussions about how business is going on, how the goals are set, goals are set for next year, and how the goals are met for this year, and so on and so on. But basically, they don't interfere up to now into the business of the company they've taken over. And they need these foothold in these German companies, and I think they do the same in Switzerland and in France, or they did it with Volvo cars in Sweden. I learned it from the Swedish Union. It's a base for further international expansion. They don't want to shut down, just take off to transfer the know-how to China and then shut down the plants, get rid of the workforce and so on. That was the basic idea we would have about a Chinese investment here, because Chinese is low cost and so on and so on. No, they don't want to do it. Up to now, they do not. They do no cash strapping. You know, when the hedge funds invested in the companies in the years after 2000, they did it. They did their investments highly leveraged. That means the hedge fund invested company, or KKR or Goldman Sachs invested company, had to pay off every year a lot of interest for the leverage which was put on by the owners. In that way, nothing is happening. Instead, all the Works Council members reported about special events. There were cash injections from the Chinese side for investments, for long delayed investments projects which could be implemented right now. 2 examples of it. The state-owned company from Shandong, which took over the Kion group, the forklift are still Linde, there's also a French brand, and I think also an Italian brand, I don't know exactly which one. They took over this company, and they invested after the takeover was settled and all the contracts were finalized, they invested for a new plant in Aschaffenburg near Frankfurt, for a new plant. The Works Council had asked for the new plant, new investments, so several years, but of course the company was, before it has been owned by Goldman Sachs and KKR, they didn't invest any cent, so it was a problem about it. So other story with Pre, with his auto electronics maker, the Chinese investor, they built a new canteen for the workers and social rooms, and okay. It's a really funny thing. Continuity. The Chinese side, which is very, which I didn't expect it, but I was very, well, it was very strange when I heard it. They didn't made any changes in management and company structure. Normally, I was with American IT companies. When the company is taken over, I was with Digital Equipment. It was taken over then by Compaq. Compaq was, of course, slashing the management, changing the corporate structure, and all these things. That normally happens. The Chinese side, they don't touch the thing. They are taking over a running company. They leave the management in place, the CEO, the CFO, and so on. So production boss, the technology boss, they don't change anything. They don't change the company structure. And they have Chinese co-managers, or let's say they are more as like assistants, and they're doing their on-the-job training. That means the CFO, the German CFO of Kion Group, has now a Chinese assistant. He explains everything what he's doing and so on, but obviously, the CFO told me, the Chinese manager on his side, he's learning how these companies are managed. They want to learn management skills, how these companies are run. They're doing on-the-job training, something like that, you would call it. And I talked about long-term strategic investment, what they're doing about the numbers, the figures, the business goals. normally, for Kion, also for the other companies, the growth targets are set as are going up. Why don't you have an 8% growth per year? It's a little bit challenging for the German machinery industry and so on and so on. But there's the setting up, and the Chinese management don't understand. They are used to 8%, 10% grow or double-digit grow in China. So why don't you Putzmeister? Why don't you grow 8%? You have given your money to grow. Go ahead. And the EBIT targets, the earnings before interest and tax, they are going down, set down. It was before, it was clear that the EBIT target was about 10%, it was set down to 7% on the Chinese side. So really changing. And then one German CEO, in a personal discussion, one German CFO wonders, the laws of economy don't apply to Chinese investors. So they have money in deep pockets, EBIT going down, growth going up, so a lot of investments. How it can work, but up to now, and for the next future, no big changes made. What are the Works Council experiences with the Chinese investors? What the workers are thinking about? That refers to the results Damien has presented. The Works Council people say the Chinese investors have a very pragmatic approach. That pragmatic approach is also toward the Works Councils. They have learned, I don't know how they learned it, up to now I don't know how they learned it. They know Works Councils in Germany, labor is important. So they involve the Works Council in the M&A process at an early stage. All the Works Councils reported that they have been engaged by the Chinese investors in the process of the M&A, not to check the figures and so on, of course not, to do due diligence. No, that was not. But obviously the Chinese investors wanted to have the Works Councils at an early stage on board of their boat to get the things done. The general attitude towards labor regulations in Germany and the same, I think in France with PSA and Sweden with Volvo, they have no idea of our established labor relations, but they accept it. They have no idea how it works, the detail, but they have to accept it and they behave like this. And a special issue we found out during the workshop. They accept the Works Council also as a voice of the highly respected skilled worker, the German Facharbeiter as we call them, which have a 3.5 years training and vocational training and then a lot of job experience. And for them, for the Chinese investors, the Works Council is more or less the voice of the skilled workers, which is basically true in Germany, but sometimes also a problem for our union representation. It might be, I'm not very clear, still not very clear about it, I have only a few hints about it, that the union image for the Chinese, the union image in Europe and Germany for the Chinese investors, it's different. Works councils have a very strong attitude toward them. When I was with the boss of the Shandong state-owned enterprise, which has, when I met him, which has taken over Kion, he told me not only the Chinese unions have to learn from Germany, but the German union has also to learn from the Chinese, he told me. So I think the union image might be different for the Chinese investors, but I have no very clear idea about it. There was one. There's been one issue 2 or 3 years ago at these machinery company Waldrich Coburg in northern Bavaria. There was the management, of course the German management, they wanted to scrap the collective agreement. Was in you know, in Germany has been a big campaign by the employers' organizations to leave the collective agreements, to scrap them. And this German management and this Chinese-owned company, Waldrich, they thought, okay, good idea to scrap the collective agreement, and so on. And yeah, and then we called for a strike there. It was in 2010. And after 1 or 2 days strike, the local Chinese manager in Germany, they called their German, the official German managers for a solution, and the company is back within the collective agreement and so on. The Chinese were caught by surprise when the strike was going on. The Chinese manager came in the morning. February, the plant was closed. All members outside, 70%, 80% unionized, and he didn't know what was going on. And after 1 day, several phone calls with Beijing, the whole thing was settled. So, with other companies, up to now, we have no issue. We have no issue with the collective agreement that the Chinese make a story about it. What's the general attitude of the workers? Yeah, the general attitude of the workers is they regard Chinese investment within these companies as beneficial for their jobs and their future. They're happy. For example, the workforce at Kion, which was owned before by Goldman Sachs and KKR, and Goldman Sachs and KKR took over the company just before the financial crisis, and wanted to go, of course, with initial public offering and then make a big buck off. But then came the financial crisis. Everything went down, no chance for an IPO and so on and so on. And finally, in 2013, the Chinese investors came. So the workforce at Kion says, we are happy. Now we have the Chinese. And the same story with the 300 plus workforce at these fire brigade trucks producer. They say we have been 2 or 3 years in insolvency, and now there's a Chinese investor. US make a long-term commitment, explain the investment, we're happy about it. That's a basic issue behind it. I think, so that's the one side. The other side is labor relations in Chinese IT companies. I've only not it's empirical evidence, of course, but not only from what I got from my union colleagues and what I've heard from other people. I take 3 companies here: Huawei with Lenovo, Medion, and ZTE. Huawei Germany is Huawei Germany with German headquarters, and I think European headquarters in Düsseldorf and R&D center in Munich. They have no works councils, no union representation, no collective agreement. ZTE is another Chinese telecom provider with a German headquarters and R&D in Düsseldorf. They have got a works council but no union. And I heard from friends who work for the competitor for Ericsson in Düsseldorf, they report about unfair HR practices within ZTE and so on. Lenovo Medion Essen, they've got a works council but no union. That's my conclusion is the Chinese IT multinationals' behavior fits into the general picture of employment relations in the IT sector. They're doing the same what the other IT companies, Oracle, you name it, they all are doing. The Chinese doing the same. Of course, these investments are in the way, some way greenfield. They're building up a new R&D center in Munich, more than 300 people, Huawei, very multinational labor force. As long as no one calls for a works council, they don't touch the issue. Basta. So, some conclusions. General picture. And that's a big story for us as the unions in Europe. The Chinese investors which will come with more money and more numbers within the next few years to Europe. I'm quite sure about it. These investors are lacking basic knowledge about co-determination, collective bargaining, and so on. They don't know what's really going on. And there is an issue, what we have to prepare for it. I don't know how to do it right now. Perhaps we should also organize from the union side, together with the Chinese Chamber of Commerce in Brussels or somewhere for Chinese investors or Germany, some sort of seminars, workshops for them to give them a basic idea. It's better we are doing it than the employers' organization in Germany or in Europe that are doing it. So we have to do something about it, because from China they have no picture how co-determination, how good, stable, harmonious social relations can work. They will always have a harmonious society, but with their approach to labor it doesn't work. Yeah. Also, the general picture is to employment and labor relations in Germany. They have a very pragmatic and, let's say, opportunistic approach. Where these works councils are strong, where the union is strong, they don't touch it. They accept it. Basically, that's it. There are no. That's different to the. Sometimes different to American investors. I've personally experienced with them. I've worked for American IT companies. They are really, staunch liberal, hard neoliberals with an ideology against unions and so on and so on. That's for them it's different. Okay, these works councils and unions are in place. Okay, we accept them. So that means after taking over established SME companies, Mittelstand firms, they accept, of course, co-determination agreements and so on. And up to now, no story except this strike, but has been the German management, no story of scrapping those agreements. With the greenfield plants, greenfield R&D centers, I think this Foxconn is the same. They don't have any respect for local labor relations, but in Germany that's nothing special for the Chinese. Other investors, IT investors from other countries doing the same. Yeah. That's my report about our experience with Chinese investors, and thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's in a way to reinforce what Damien was arguing, adding perhaps, and we will continue this discussion, the behavior that could be different according to the sectors and the country. So we move to the last presentation, and which is with the title "The Dormitory Regimes," apparently much more negative about the working condition of the employee of Foxconn in Czech Republic.
Thanks a lot to invite me. I'm a little bit more in a case study about Foxconn in Czech Republic, and this presentation is based on empirical research on 2 factories in Czech Republic, and I'm going to speak about the so-called dormitory regime and about temporary work agency that supply almost half of the workforce to Foxconn plants in Czech Republic. We sustain that the dormitory regime permits to compress space and time of the production, managing labor turnover on the basis of the production needs, avoiding at the same time the rise of labor relation, class conscience among workers, and so on. So the idea is, first of all, I will explain briefly who is Foxconn, the third more important private employer in the world, and how in the last 15 years Foxconn invested in Europe. And we will analyze what happened when the expansion of supply chain flowed to Europe. So then we stop to the role of temporary work agency. In particular, Foxconn in Czech Republic has 3 temporary work agency, and the interlink between among the labor process and the reproduction process that is very important in this case. And we try to explain a little bit more about what it means for workers to stay in the dormitories, and also the worker strategy to overcome the problem. So Foxconn produced for the most important electronic brands and adopted a jumping scale of capital accumulation strategy, which allows to situate their plants in export processing zone, as in Turkey or in Mexico, or in other places where there is lower production costs, also in Czech Republic, or if we can see also in Hungary, or in Slovakia, or in Russia, where Foxconn has some plants. There is wage levels that are not so higher than in China, and has various methods of labor relation. Foxconn develops spatial and temporal strategies to meet the needs of clients. This means that Foxconn operates a global just-in-time production system, and the various factories, the various plants where production is localized, function as enclaves that are in close cooperation, competition each other. We have to bear in mind that Foxconn is a Taiwanese company, is not Chinese. Also, as many other Taiwanese companies has been operating in China since 1980s. It has 1.3 million of workers, and 1 million is in China. And in the last 15 years, developed a territorial diversification strategy, particularly in Latin America and in Eastern Europe. I think is very important. Well, we did the research in 2012, doing interview during February, June, September, for a few weeks with the help of some interpreter inside. The two plants in Pardubice and Kutnaora has about 5,000-6,000 workers. One and the other is a greenfield, Kutnaora, 2,000-3,000 workers. And during the field work, we were at the same place, the same dormitories of workers, so could understand better what it means to go inside and to live inside this dormitory. Just some idea of the diversity difference that there is inside of Foxconn plants, and maybe it's more similar what you speak about IT Germany, IT FADI Chinese in German, and it's very segmented inside the plant. So they change immediately all the manager come from Taiwan and China, but also some British and some workers are manager, and when they encounter resistance, which was reflected mainly in high employee turnover, they try to import migrants, laborers on a large scale. In the two factories, the labor force is divided along various lines: nationality, type of contract, gender, age, type of shift worked, accommodation, wage, and so on. Czech are usually hired directly by Foxconn, and they make up around half of the workforce. And the other employees are Slovak, Polish, Romanians, Bulgarians, Ukrainians, Vietnamese, Mongolians. The migrants, in particular European Union citizens, are employed by recruitment agency, is about 40% of workforce. They work usually 12 hours a day, and they have a shift, one shift a day, one shift a night, and Foxconn employees work with different working shifts. Some is 8 hours and the other 12 hours. There is also difference in wage. Employees are paid around 3.5 euros per hour and earn about 600 euros per month. Temporary workers are only paid when they, obviously, when they work and have to make to do with 2.5 euros per hour, with about 400, sometimes 500 euros a month. And here is a classic labor process and of electronics company with a very easy task, repetitive. They call screwdriver factory. they use Kaizen system with a just-in-time and so on. And people inside, they have a multitask operator, so they can change the very easy job, the very easy task every day. What it means, first of all, the compression of space and time and the role of temporary work agency inside. Foxconn use a recruitment agency to ensure flexible European labor is quickly available whenever the need arises. So to adjust the supply of labor on the basis of economic cycle. So the dormitories permit to overcome local labor market and to assess a continued fresh labor reserves in all European countries, maintaining low wage and high productivity. The agency recruits workers directly from their countries of origin, and the selection is very rapid, very speedy. And then the agency provides transport, and they put the workers in the dormitories, they control them inside the factory, and they control them also in the dormitories. What is important here is that dormitories make possible for the agency and the Foxconn not to put the workers to work for several days without the risk of having to deal with the shortage of workers. In fact, the shared experience of workers is to wait for a week, for a day in the dormitory without work. And this space-time compression in the recruitment process consists also in a rapid firing and moving back of the workforce when Foxconn doesn't need these workers. They are temporarily returned to the countries of origin. So it's important to say that dormitory are not new in Czech Republic as in other socialist countries. Now the difference is that now there is a more heterogeneous labor force and more diversified forms of its control. The dormitories are not for Czech commuters from rural to urban area, staying there for a week or so, but host short-term European Union migrant workers. Another important difference is that the shift from the state to a multinational or temporary work agency in managing the dormitory regime. The experience of time and space is very different for Czech workers and migrants and agency workers. The first live their normal life in the surrounding village or in the city. The second are precarious with a temporary contract living in the dormitories. Migrant workers in Foxconn Czech's plant live separated from the local communities, have not a real community able to sustain them. This segmentation of the workforce, so in the production sphere, is replicated also in the daily reproduction sphere. It means that Czech and agency workers occupy space that is becoming increasingly segmented and racialized. There are several dormitories. These are two of these. The first one is Hotel Harmony, that is that, and this is Urka, is another army barracks. The dormitory vary in size and they can host from a couple of hundreds to 1,000 people, and each dormitory is rented out for its most part to one agency. Yet, like in China, there is a clear hierarchy in the arrangement of dormitories, but in Czech Republic, migrant workers seem further divided due to worker skill, professional experience, nationality, and the agency they work for. The accommodation in the dormitories is paid by the agency up to 3,000 crowns, it's about 150 euros per workers per month. Some agency workers live in the dormitory for only 6 months, but others stay for 5 years. The location of workers in each dormitory and their distribution into rooms is managed by the agency. During the working time, the migrant workers are controlled by Foxconn manager and the coordinator of agency, the coordinator of production. And in the dormitories, they have no almost private space, living usually in rooms with 4 beds, and in some cases bathrooms are shared both by males and females. Agency migrant workers spend all their time in the dormitories. The segregation of their lives does not apply to other space because they can move outside, but usually they don't go far away. Pardubice is about 1 hour and a half from Prague, but just few people go to see this beautiful city. The dormitories then make it possible for Foxconn to avail itself of a potential workforce that is permanently under the discreet control of the agency. Agency have coordinators for dormitories who are responsible for allocation of rooms and for administrative work, as well as for controlling the workers. The coordinator role is to maintain order in the dormitory among the workers. Control is not obsessive, but is continuous and aims at suppressing behavior considered dangerous by company, such as smoking in the rooms, or that can decrease the productivity, such as drinking or camaraderie, hosting friends. Here I put the rule are a lot of rules at Hurka dormitory, that is that, and where there is about 800 people. So people has these rules to respect for all the time. Can I have? Workers complain that agency coordinator enter into their rooms and pressure them to go to work, even if they have just finished their shift, or wake them up in case they are sleeping in order to make them to go to work. The incursion on the intimate life by agency coordinators aims to a superficial control, but at the same time it is also a manner of gathering information about a worker and his or her behavior that can contribute to the decision to keep or dismiss a worker. These are other rules at the worker dormitory. In order to escape such forms of control and pressure, some workers move to private flats where they feel more independent and less controlled. When workers move into flats outside the city, agency contribute with 3,000 Czech koruna, or approximately 150 euro, to rent, to pay the rent, and the workers pay the rest. There is a space for new networks for agency of the workers. I think that international temporary work agency in Europe move labor across different countries, facilitating movement of migrants across national borders. This reshaping of the spatiality of worker mobility is counterbalanced by the chance for migrant workers to use different networks, informal and formal, or different temporary work agencies to look for a job. How Rogali North Capital sought its own special fix, but so did labor. Living in the dormitories reinforced a relationship among workers, but is considered a good solution only for young people. For workers, dormitories are space to establish a new relationship and to understand what is going on in the factory, but also in other parts of the European labor market. The networks of migrant workers are in fact developed through all Europe, and in the case of Vietnamese, also in other parts of the world. So, to stay in the dormitory, it's possible to have information of opportunities to work also in other parts of Europe or in the world. For some experts, European Union migrants' situation could be considered a perfect condition to agency, without the burden of a family to maintain or the problem of the permit to stay. But so far, this multinational workforce hasn't developed any significant bonds, and they remain divided along ethnic lines, with people preferring to take advantage of opportunity in the workplace independently. On the other side, when agency workers try to contract a better working condition, they have to consider also the reproduction sphere, because if they lose the job, they remain immediately also without a place where to stay. In fact, when workers break the rules in the production process or in the dormitory, they can be easily fired, and they have in few hours to leave the room or to pay for their accommodation. The role of trade union remain marginal, because it mainly acts on a local level with very little coordination between the two Czech factories or with the other factory in Slovakia. In the Czech Republic, the temporary employment agency and the dormitory regime play a key role in managing and stratifying the labor force. Managing migrant labor through temporary work agency and dormitories permits to Foxconn to compress space and time elements to produce just in time, but also to prevent organizing workers. Space-time compression is crucial to slow down the rise of collective protest, because workers have few time to organize themselves and are disoriented. Furthermore, the labor turnover managed by employer prevents the possibility to develop meaningful connection among workers. The separation of the workforce across contract, employers, shift work, space over production represent an obstacle often difficult to overcome to create a base for the construction of solidarity relationship. This kind of young and adult, men and women, migrant proletariat that move easily in Europe are at the moment more similar to hobos than to IWW of the first years of the 20th century United States. They are not able to make a spirit of working class, also because the memory of Eastern European past is yet very strong. But the space of both work and residence of the migrant workers is also widely open to potential worker unity and resistance. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. It's time for question now. Let's who want to have the floor. Nobody?
Thank you for the both very interesting presentations. Maybe I would just have some detailed, very detailed questions, because what you just described is in major points quite similar to the situation of Foxconn workers in China. Not the scale, not the vastness of location, but the dormitory regime, the segmentation of work, the migrant workers is quite similar. What struck me as very different is the amount of male labor force, because in China the electronics manufacturing is mostly female, so it would be maybe interesting to get to know more about this. And then about wage levels. You put on some numbers, but how much is this actually in relation to Czech wage levels? I have no idea. Is this a high? It's probably a low level, but is it sufficient? Is it a subsistence level, or is it lower? And then what I would also, as a last, one question. Are the wages highly performance related? So do you have a big
bonus?
Probably you do have. And then just one last question. In one report I once read that Foxconn is renting out single production lines to work agencies. I didn't really understand why they are doing it, so maybe you could expand on this. Thank you.
Yeah, I also have a more general question for the four discussants. Do you think that a common European approach to FDI from China would be possible?
Okay. Other questions? Yes, Victor.
And from ETUI, Health and Safety Unit, I have a question. Have you collected information from the workers? If you included all the nations, for example, all the migrant, because you said that there were Mongolians and Poles, Bulgarians, and so on, and so their individual perceiving of situation could be of course different. So the question regarding the minimum, regarding the wages in Foxconn. So from 1st January in 2015, and the minimum wage is by law 400 euros. So it's a minimum wage.
How many?
In fact,
How much?
400.
400.
Plus minus 400 euros. So of course, if they pay for dormitory 150 euros, so there is still something for surviving. But these people are in very difficult situation. So this question was mainly on which groups were interviewed.
Okay, other question? Yes.
May I ask a question to Wolfgang Müller? I was a bit curious to hear more from you about what triggered the setting up of this network. You sort of said that in 2013, works councillors from southern Germany called you up and sort of wanted something of such a structure to be set up. At the same time, they did not seem to be facing particular threats, right? I mean, everything seems to be going well, so why a particular structure on Chinese investors, and why to create this network when actually it may not be needed? So
I have also a question for Wolfgang. That's because is there a strategy? Because apparently it's a strategy also from IG Metall to gather information, and with the interesting result you have to have a more offensive approach about the multinational in China. So you can explore that and to say, okay, if you accept the German model in Germany, why not to implement part of the model or try to implement part of the model in China, which could be interesting and have some perhaps even support if you say that the Chinese manager are learning from the German manager inside the enterprise, or changing learning process in China, having a different approach. Is there a strategy, a more long-term strategy from IG Metall or from other trade unions in Germany?
I start with the last two questions. One about why this network of works council in companies with Chinese investors. I got a phone call first from a Kion Works Council member. You have been so often in China. We have no experience. What is China, Chinese business, Chinese state-owned companies all about? And can we have a workshop and can we meet? The second problem, and that was the start of the whole thing. the second thing is about well, there is a shortcoming of the Chinese investors also when they behave at the moment very pragmatic according to established labor standards, labor relations. There are no direct relations with the Works Council and the Works Council bosses and the owners and the investors. That's a problem. For example, a lot of these companies, small and medium enterprise, Mittelstand companies, were family-owned before, have been family-owned before. So normally there is a direct hotline between the Works Council boss and the owner of the company. If there's an issue and so on, they know each other and so on and so on. And now with the Chinese owners, there is no direct relation. There's no direct relation. And a big issue right now is, and we will try to sort it out in next year perhaps, to match the works councils in Germany and these Chinese invested companies with the Chinese shop floor unions in their respective Chinese owner companies. We will try it out how it works. The idea is to have such a workshop next year in China and to invite also the representatives from, let's say, the shop floor trade union at Weichai Power, which is the owner of Kion, and to invite the shop floor trade union of the Pan family company in China, which is the owner of Pre or whatever. So to get some relations on this issue, and also to get more direct relations between the works councils in Germany and the Chinese owners also, because in a family-owned company you can solve a lot of issues via phone call, direct talk, and so on. A lot of issues. And now the owner is in Beijing or somewhere, Hangzhou, and so on. How to get to know to them? For example, Putzmeister, this concrete pumps company, which is very much specialized and a well-known brand in the construction industries. They are owned now by Sany, the biggest construction equipment maker worldwide. And the boss of Sany is one of the richest men in China. And how to get in contact with him? What are his further plans in Europe and so on? Of course, for example, these growth targets, they set it for 8%, 10%. Right now they can't fulfill the growth targets. It's impossible with the economy in Europe, and so on and so on. And so they need a direct approach to them. That will be one of the issues we have to solve next. Yeah, that's the background why we need some sort of that kind of network. And what is about, is there an IG Metall strategy about it? Yeah. Has been never discussed, but in fact we are going some way in this direction. For example, I personally, also some other colleagues in Frankfurt, we are doing since 2006, 2007 a lot of 2 or 3 workshops, seminars a year, how we do collective bargaining in Germany and how co-determination works. And this is a totally new story for the Chinese. I did it in October in Shandong province for more than 300 trade unionists 2 days. It was a heavy issue. And the problem is the Chinese, obviously they are quite interested in the model of social relations we have in Germany, Scandinavia, in parts of Europe. They know very much from literature what's happening in Europe, all over Europe, and what the social relations are like, and they want to learn about it. For example, the Shandong province province boss of the trade union, he asked me, "We've got German equipment, German machinery in our plants. We have got your processes in place, but the output is crap. So what do we wrong?" So they are in a process to implement. They are trying to understand, how to say, the software of our industries. I will call it the software, the soft skills, how the company has to be managed, how labor relations have to be managed, that the outcome is good. Normally the fluctuation in Chinese companies between 20 to 50% per year turnover. At that level of fluctuation, what an personal example I had at Bosch. At Foxconn in China it's about 120% per year turnover. So with these examples you can't set up real good industrial high quality processes. Impossible. And with the Chinese educational system, which is in favor of these high sophisticated elite universities, Beijing University and so on, everyone has to go to a university and ends at Foxconn, this system obviously doesn't work. They have to implement also some sort of, let's say, vocational training, but this vocational training to invest through 2 or 3 years in a vocational training as a single employer, and after 3 years the highly qualified new employee leaves the company because he gets at the next corner he gets more money. That doesn't work. So the Chinese system has a lot of shortcomings, the Chinese industrial system. It's good for cheap products, quick turnover and so on, but to develop high quality products and so on doesn't work. Last point about it, high quality. I told about one company which is already owned since 2006 from a Chinese state-owned company. And since that time they're doing a yearly transfer of engineers, Chinese technicians to Germany and German technicians to China and so on and so on. And still they don't get the same machinery equipment, to build the same machinery equipment with the same quality in nanometers and so on. They don't get it right now after 8 years. After 8 years of training, that's still a big problem. Okay, that was about the 2 questions.
Can I have a follow-up question on that?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I know it's different companies, size companies, but what about the experience, say, of the Works Council in VW in China? I understand every VW plant, except for Tennessee, has got a Works Council. But I mean, and how do the Works Council in China, relate to the Metall people in Germany?
It's let's say it's a work in progress, and I have some good examples. Volkswagen is not so good example up to now. Good example is BMW. I've personally been in this autumn in Sweden at the Industry All Automotive Group meeting, and there was the representative of BMW China has been there, an engineer, very clever guy, and he's elected representative for the BMW plant in China and for the BMW research headquarters in China. And he was together at this Industry All meeting with his German counterpart, the German Works Council boss, Manfred Schoch. They have been together there, Volkswagen, at BMW. Same happens with Siemens. They have at Siemens has about 25, something like that, plants all over China, Chengdu, Shanghai, Foshan, everywhere. And next spring, of course, these companies are in different provinces, and different provinces have different rules of how to do collective bargaining, so-called collective bargaining in China. Yeah, different ways and so on. And now now since last year there exists an informal meeting supported by management of all the representatives of all the Chinese Siemens China shop floor trade unions all over China to meet 1 or 2 times a year. And next year in April we will have a 3 or 4 days workshop on how to do collective bargaining. Because normally the process in China goes like this, the management says we give you 6%, let's say it, and then the Works Council boss normally signs. sometimes the works council boss is also the HR boss in China, so same story. But there are some developments like this going in that way. But there's also competition. That's a problem within Volkswagen. You mentioned Volkswagen. Different provinces and the trade unions of different provinces, they compete with each other. For example, Volkswagen has a new plant in the Pearl River Delta. They produce there the Golf and the Audi A3, I think, in Pearl River Delta, Foshan. And it's an investment, a joint venture investment by First Automotive Works, FAW and Volkswagen. But FAW headquarters is in northern China, in Jilin province. That means, according to Chinese law, there's no very clear-cut line, the provincial trade union of northern China is in charge of the shop floor trade union in the Pearl River Delta near Hong Kong, in the Volkswagen plant, which is crazy, by the way. And the Guangdong provincial trade union, they raises hell about that issue. It isn't solved right now, and there are a lot of problems about it. So, yeah. Let's give a picture.
So I have two additional questions, Bella and Martin.
Shall I take it first?
Yeah, the mic to...
Just one and Tommy. Okay, sorry, mine is not a question. I just would like to use the opportunity to advertise something for the ETUI. We have a Chinese translation of collective bargaining in Europe. That was coming out from a cooperation with the Chinese Labour Institute a couple of years ago, and it was their request, and actually they did it. So actually we have Chinese language collective bargaining in Europe, countries, Western and Eastern Europe, and maybe it could be still of interest for... So I see that there is an interest.
I will ask for it. Next time I got the chance.
I don't even know.
Okay, Martin Mind from ETUI. I wanted to follow on from Tom's question, and you're taking up the slightly different angle to it. Everything about the investment sounds as if it's intended to be quite long term, as if in China they don't know about these sort of come in quickly, grab and go out again. They don't do that sort of thing. So it's long-term investment, but from what you've said, they don't understand that you need long-term employment as well. So taking that, Tom's question, what happens in Volkswagen in China? Do they have to take means to reduce the labour turnover so that they have a reliable and adequately skilled workforce? Or have they not been able to solve that?
Within Volkswagen, and I think it's similar within GM, China, it's not a big problem, the turnover, because they pay wages far above market level. And as far as I know, at Volkswagen, at least in northern China and in Shanghai, there's a turnover is just 5%, which is high according to German standard, but for Chinese standards very low. In the Pearl River Delta, the situation is different. The Pearl River Delta has a labor shortage, and the production manager in German, he told me they have really problems to find skilled workers who can do the maintenance work of the high sophisticated equipment, and in order to get them, they have to offer them to cheap apartments, for example. The housing market, real estate market is a special problem in China. So Volkswagen is now going onto the real estate market to give them, to give the workers, the skilled workers, an issue to stay with them. That's a problem. But also with other German companies. In the Bosch, I was with a Bosch company. They're doing the Bosch power tools near Hangzhou. The whole workforce are migrant workers, and they paid, that was in 2012, 2 months bonus, 2 months wages bonus when the workers come back after Spring Festival. And they managed to get the turnover at this low low double-digit rates. Low double-digit rates. That's a big problem, big issue. Not for Volkswagen and those BMW and so on, but for all these companies where the profits are more squeezed, which rely on migrant workers, very big issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, also my experience in Guangzhou, in Piaggio and Magneti Marelli, metal workers, was the same about the labor turnover. The manager, Italian manager said that it was very
crazy about it.
yeah, it was incredible. But about Foxconn, yeah, I think some question is a different scale. So here are planes of 5,000, 6,000, and the other is 3,000. You know, the other is a little bit more, 400,000 people and so on. So, and I think we have to consider also the legislation about hukou system in China, and that is a little bit different for European migrant workers. It's difficult sometimes to speak about migrants. They are just mobility in Europe, you know. And I think that we have to consider this mobility. When I was speaking about hubs or IWW, it was because we met a lot of people, European Union citizens, that have a different labor experience in Europe. So they stay maybe in Italy, in Spain, in Czech Republic, they go back to Romania, and then they move again to Slovakia and so on. So they have a different experience, and they can understand immediately the wage level. Also, that is not only the wage level, but is also reproduction. Because if I am in the dormitories, well, it's not a good life maybe, but I don't spend any money inside, or apparently I don't spend. Well, a temporary work agency pay for me, but you know, they take from my wage, obviously. But I think that other difference respect to China is that the rooms are for 4 people. There is also, well, in China there is for 8 or more people, you know, it's, well, it's not so, you know, and some are couple, are family without kids, obviously, but are family that stay in the same room. That is a little bit different, you know. You have not so big alienation, and the workers in Czech Republic are, there is a division of nationality, so some of the building are for Romanians, the other are for Bulgarian. Well, obviously you have not this division very strict, but anyway, if you study China dormitories, you can understand that they used to study very well to more segmented the workforce from the area of origin. Another big difference is that you say that obviously there is more male than women, female, and I didn't speak about the age. Also, people are older than China. Here you can find also people over 40 years, 45 years old, and are people that maybe also come from mines in Bulgaria. I remember Marek. And I think that there is a different labor market, a strict labor market. They find more difficult to find people, and it's all Europe, you know, they call it. So I think this is one of the problems. So they can hire also male people more. The wage level, Foxconn lower the wage level when they arrived in Pardubice. So also the other companies inside obviously lower also the level. They have a bonus that is linked to productivity, and is a bonus every month. And sometimes there is some lines, assembly lines, that are subcontracted to other firms that they say that are in charge or very close to temporary work agency. Is a different name, but is the same job. I think that is linked also to the change of migrant law in 2010, 2011, Marek? I don't remember the year. They changed the migrant law, so it's more difficult now to hire migrants from non-European Union countries. So, and they have a permit to stay only for 6 months. They have to spend a lot of money, and also Foxconn changed this composition of workforce. Before they had more Vietnamese, Mongolian. Now they have more European Union migrants, and so you can understand this from. I think when we look to the investment to Chinese, but not only Chinese, they look very well the composition of workforce, of nationality, of gender, age, and they are able to change very quickly. And when you go to invest, you look also to the logistic question, for example, to stay in Czech Republic with 400, 500 euro wage, and you are very close to European markets. So, you know, this is one. The information from workers, we were inside the dormitories, we had a very good Czech researcher that helped us, and the other interpreter, Romanian, Mongolian, Vietnamese, that helped us. It was very difficult. And we tried, after we record all the interview, or 90% of interview, and we asked two people, for example, Vietnamese speaking, to transcribe all the interviews. This was the information. We asked also to labor inspectorate of Pardubice or office, the Minister of Labor and so on in Prague, or trade unions in Prague and also in Pardubice and Kutná Hora. Dormitories are outside the factory, are not inside factory. And I think people feel more free, and they don't, and if they are fired, they don't stay in the area. Maybe they go back, you know. But in China it's very different. People often stay in the same big area, industrial area, you know, but they don't move, I think.
To say that?
Yes, just a very brief answer to the woman who I think has just left, which was, is it possible to have a common European approach to Chinese investment? And from my case study and looking at Serbia, it would indicate that that's very difficult, because Serbia is outside the European Union at the moment, although it's a candidate country. But generally the flow of Chinese investment is going into the southeast region, which is in some senses outside the regulative ambit of the European Union. So I think there's a major challenge there, really, for policymakers from within Europe to regulate that flow of capital into the marginal or the more peripheral areas of Europe.
Okay. Okay. So thank you all for having this very interesting symposium on China investment in Europe. We certainly will continue to invest time and research and training on that, as all of you said, that will be a growing trend in the future. And also I think from your presentation we also see the diversity of the situation, and also how it's difficult, I think, to apply our own categories when we speak about state and private capital, when we turn to the Chinese situation. So I think thank you all for coming, thank you all for coming and staying until the end, and we will keep in touch for further action, research, and certainly as ETUC has its project funded by the European Commission, there will be other opportunity to continue this conversation. So thank you.